welcome to G Fun Facts Online. In America, it feels like it's always been Democrats versus Republicans. For over 150 years, these two giants have dominated politics, making any other group, a so-called third party, seem like a sideshow. But dismissing them is a mistake. Throughout American history, these outsiders have been crucial catalysts for change, introducing radical ideas that eventually became law, and sometimes completely upending presidential elections. This is the story of those who dared to challenge the two-party system. Let's start in the early 19th century. The first major third party wasn't born from a debate about taxes or government, but from a bizarre conspiracy theory. In 1826, a man named William Morgan threatened to expose the secrets of the Freemasons, and then he vanished. The public outcry led to the Anti-Masonic Party, a movement fueled by anti-elitism and suspicion. They were the first party in history to hold a national nominating convention, a practice every major party uses today. While they faded, they proved a new party could mobilize public anger. Soon, a much more serious issue took center stage: slavery. The two major parties, the Whigs and Democrats, tried to avoid it, but abolitionists formed the Liberty Party in 1840. They didn't win, but in the 1844 election, they likely pulled enough votes from the Whig candidate in New York to hand the presidency to the Democrat, James K. Polk. This was an early, powerful example of the, quote, spoiler effect. A few years later, the Free Soil Party emerged, not to abolish slavery everywhere, but to stop its expansion into new Western territories. In 1848, their candidate, former President Martin Van Buren, won a stunning 10% of the vote. These anti-slavery parties forced the issue, shattering the old political system and paving the way for a new major party you might have heard of, the Republicans. Fast forward to the late 19th century. America was industrializing, and farmers in the South and West felt crushed by powerful railroads and banks. Their anger gave birth to the People's Party, or the Populists. For their time, they were radical. Their 1892 platform called for government ownership of railroads, a graduated income tax, and the direct election of senators. Their presidential candidate, James B. Weaver, won over 1 million votes and carried 4 states. In 1896, the Democratic Party saw the Populists' power and co-opted their main issue, the call for free silver to help debtors. The Democrats nominated William Jennings Bryan, a charismatic speaker who embraced the populist cause. The Populists, fearing they would split the vote and guarantee a Republican win, fused with the Democrats and endorsed Bryan. He lost, and the Populist Party faded, but their ideas lived on. A graduated income tax became the 16th Amendment. The direct election of senators became the 17th. The Populists lost the battle, but in many ways they won the war. The dawn of the 20th century brought the Progressive Era, and with it, one of the most dramatic elections in American history. In 1912, former President Theodore Roosevelt, feeling his hand-picked successor William Howard Taft was too conservative, challenged him for the Republican nomination. The party bosses stuck with Taft, so Roosevelt, furious, walked out and formed his own progressive party, nicknamed the Bull Moose Party. His platform was bold: women's suffrage, an 8-hour workday, a ban on child labor, and strong government regulation of business. In the three-way race between Republican Taft, Bull Moose Roosevelt, and Democrat Woodrow Wilson, Roosevelt split the Republican vote. Wilson won the presidency with only 42% of the popular vote. Roosevelt came in second, with 27% of the vote and 88 electoral votes, the most successful third-party run in American history. While Roosevelt wanted to reform capitalism, another party wanted to replace it entirely. The Socialist Party of America, led by the charismatic Eugene V. Debs, reached its peak in that same 1912 election. Debs won 6% of the vote, advocating for public ownership of railroads and a national social insurance system. Many of their radical ideas, like unemployment insurance, were later adopted in programs like the New Deal. Debs' legacy was so enduring that in 1920, he ran for president from a federal prison cell. where he was jailed for speaking out against World War I and still received nearly 1 million votes. By the mid-20th century, the defining issue was civil rights. The Democratic Party had long relied on the Solid South, a bloc of white voters who supported segregation. When President Harry Truman began to take steps towards racial equality in 1948, Southern Democrats revolted. They formed the States' Rights Democratic Party, or Dixiecrats, and nominated Governor Strom Thurmond of South Carolina. Their goal wasn't to win, but to throw the election to the House of Representatives to protect segregation. Thurmond won 4 states. While Truman still won, the revolt marked the beginning of the end for the Democratic hold on the South. 20 years later, in 1968, Alabama Governor George Wallace ran on a similar platform with his American Independent Party. Wallace combined pro-segregation rhetoric with populist attacks on elites and anti-war protesters. He won 13.5% of the vote and carried 5 Southern states. He was the last third-party candidate to win any electoral votes. Wallace's campaign showed the power of a populist, anti-establishment message and provided a blueprint for Richard Nixon's Southern strategy, which successfully flipped white Southern voters to the Republican Party, a realignment that shapes politics to this day. Of course, not all modern third parties have come from the political extremes. In 1992, Texas billionaire Ross Perot burst onto the scene as an independent. Railing against the national debt and free trade agreements, he funded his campaign with his own fortune, running 30-minute infomercials that explained his policies. For a time, he actually led in the polls against George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. He abruptly dropped out and then re-entered the race, but still won a shocking 19% of the popular vote, the best showing since Roosevelt in 1912. Though he won no electoral votes, Republicans blamed him for siphoning votes from Bush and giving the election to Clinton. More importantly, he forced the national debt into the spotlight, dominating political debate for the rest of the decade. Then came the 2000 election, one of the closest in history. At its center was consumer advocate Ralph Nader, the candidate for the left-wing Green Party. Nader argued there was no real difference between the two major parties. He won less than 3% of the national vote, but his numbers in key states were critical. In Florida, which was decided by just 537 votes, Nader received over 97,000. In New Hampshire, which Al Gore lost by about 7,000 votes, Nader 22,001. The argument that Nader's candidacy spoiled the election for Gore and handed the presidency to George W. Bush became the textbook example of the spoiler effect. This fear that a vote for a third party will inadvertently help elect the candidate you oppose most is a powerful deterrent for many voters. So why, after all this, does the two-party system remain so dominant? The biggest reason is the winner-take-all electoral system. In nearly every U.S. election, the candidate with the most votes wins, period. There are no prizes for second or third place. This encourages voters to choose one of the two candidates with a realistic chance, rather than wasting a vote. This is reinforced by the Electoral College, which requires a candidate to win entire states, not just accumulate a high national vote count like Ross Perot did. On top of that, restrictive ballot access laws and a lack of media coverage and funding create enormous hurdles for any challenger. Despite these obstacles, the appeal of a third option endures. Polls consistently show a majority of Americans are unhappy with both parties. Third parties give a voice to the dissatisfied. They are policy pioneers, bringing new ideas into the mainstream. They are spoilers, revealing the fractures in the major parties' coalitions. They may not win the White House, but the history of third parties is a story of long shots and lost causes that have repeatedly and profoundly changed the course of America.